Mr. Lefebvre. I teach 9th grade biology here at Montopolis.
All right, Mr. Lefebvre. So I'm going to ask you a couple of questions about the pandemic, about mental health, and just answer them to the best of your ability.
Cool, let's do it.
All right. So first question, what was your initial reaction to the world shutting down and the COVID-19 pandemic?
So my initial reaction was probably surprise. I remember hearing about it last year when I was teaching. People were starting to talk about it, thought it was kind of serious. I didn't know at first, and then we started working from home for the rest of the year, and that's when I first realized, oh wow, this is a big deal. To the point where I was at home thinking, wow, I should probably order one of these mask things, because it's probably going to be tough to get your hands on some of them. That's when I knew it was real serious.
Awesome. Second question. So what has your experience been, or what was your experience throughout quarantine when we had to stay at home?
So I think my experience was kind of different than most people's, because I was in the Navy for 6 years, and 4 years of it was on an aircraft carrier, so I'm used to being stuck in one spot, not being able to leave. So for me, it wasn't bad, because this time I had internet. On the aircraft carrier, didn't have internet, so this was pretty great. And I'm kind of a homebody to begin with, so it really wasn't too bad for me.
All right. Still sticking with the quarantine theme. So when you did have to go out in public, whether it be to H-E-B, Target, Walmart, etc., how was your experience being out in public around people while in quarantine?
So I didn't have too much trouble going out. I would go out just for necessities, nothing extra, but when I'd have to go and get groceries, the only thing that would really bother me would be when people were standing too close to you. I already like having my own personal space, and even on higher alert with COVID-19 around, so I was like, you want to tell people to back up, but you also don't want to, so that was kind of my biggest issue.
All right, so thinking about coming back to work when we actually had to come back in person with all of the new restrictions with COVID, what was your experience or your thoughts about coming back to work?
I was excited to come back to work, mostly because it's good to have... I started coming back to work sooner than most people, just because it was nice to have a quiet spot that I could just focus on work, and then when I was done with work, I could leave work and go home and just have fun, instead of kind of trying to blur that line at home and having distractions. I like not having distractions here.
Awesome. So on to the vaccine. So are you vaccinated?
Yes.
Awesome. And so why did you choose to get vaccinated?
I chose to get vaccinated because I'm the biology teacher. I also believe that vaccines are one of humanity's greatest inventions, especially this latest one. And I think I enjoy being part of the solution, and it makes me feel more comfortable when I'm out just living my life, going to the grocery store, whatnot.
Awesome. All right. So thinking about everything that's happened throughout the pandemic in the last year and a half, what is one positive thing that you've experienced? Personal, professional, anything? And then what's one negative or not so positive thing you've experienced?
Positive thing would be I got married at the end of last year, so that was great. I got married on a Zoom wedding. It was quite the experience. It'll be a great story. But a negative thing would kind of be tied to that. I couldn't really connect with my family or my friends to celebrate, so that was kind of rough. But looking forward to doing that later this year.
Awesome. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Hi, I'm Deborah Williams. I'm the school social worker on the CP side.
All right. I'm going to ask you a couple of questions in relation to the pandemic. So first question is, what was your initial reaction when everything started shutting down and the world started closing?
I kind of was like not really affected by it. I was like, okay, because I'm an introvert, so I like stay home anyway. And then when it got more serious, I was like, this is wild. Like, I never thought that anything would happen like this while I was this young, I guess. So that was my initial reaction.
Cool. All right. So throughout quarantine, having to stay at home and be away from everybody, what was your experience?
So it was really hard for me to stay away from my family, but I was okay like socially because again I'm an introvert, so it was fine at first. But then eventually, like when you stay in the house with people that you live with and you can't do anything else or have any outlets, eventually you go a little stir crazy. So eventually, like, my mental health was not that great, and I had to continue going to work. And so at the time I worked at the Travis County Jail as a mental health counselor, and it was very difficult for me to be there because not only was I not able to give my clients like resources, but I couldn't help them through this thing, and that because it was so dangerous, they got they had more restrictive rules, I guess, and so it was really hard to watch them go through that, and I eventually ended up quitting because of that.
All right. So when you did have to go out in public, like go to the grocery store or anything like that, what was your experience?
I was glad that we had to stay like 6 feet apart because some people are too close anyway, but also it was really hard to like stand in line for that long. I mean, it was okay because we were doing it for a reason, but going in public just made me nervous. I didn't really want to do anything, but it was cool. It was alright.
All right. So the next question, are you vaccinated?
No.
All right. Do you have any particular reason or just you don't feel like?
No, I don't have a particular reason for it. I just have not done it.
Awesome. To each his own. All right. Last question. What is one positive thing you've experienced over the course of the pandemic? And then what is one more maybe negative thing or one struggle?
So one positive thing is this. Like, I got to live out my dream and to work with kids every day. Like, I wake up and get to help kids work through things that they struggle through. I'm literally being the person that I needed when I was growing up, so I love that. And then the negative would be that like my mental health was really declined. It really declined, but it pushed me to go back to therapy, which I really needed that support system in place, but I just honestly was being lazy. So it was a negative that eventually turned into a positive, but it was really hard to be away from my family and to know the experiences that people were going through. So, and that I couldn't really do anything to change it. So that part was really rough.
Awesome. Thank you so much for your time.
Bye.
Hi, I'm Christina Malukas. I'm an assistant principal and former English teacher at IDEA Montopolis.
All right. First question. So when the pandemic initially was kind of unfolded, when we started hearing about it in the news, what was your initial reactions?
So I remember I was actually here on campus. It was right before spring break. We were having a field day barbecue soccer tournament extravaganza. And I remember first reading about it and thinking, oh, this is going to last maybe a week. Like, this will be over by the time it's time to come back from spring break. And then they extended spring break, and I was like, surely this is not going to last more than another couple weeks. And then when I remember getting the phone call from Rubio that we needed to meet as a staff, and he told us that we were going to be virtual probably for the rest of the year, and thinking, there's no way this can be true. That's crazy. I don't think it hit me that we were actually in a global pandemic until the middle of the summer. Like, it took so long. Even though I was watching the news, even though I was hearing about all of the people who were getting sick and the hospitals were filling up, even though I had like knew people who had COVID, I was like, oh, there's no way this could be as serious as it is. So it took forever for me to like get it through my head that it was real.
All right. So what has your experience been throughout quarantine and like having to stay at home by yourself without a lot of social interaction?
So I really struggled getting used to working from home. I already work a lot, or I feel like I already worked a lot, and it was hard for me to figure out a balance at home. And then my family lives in Austin, so it was really hard for me not to see them in person. I really missed, I think, my family, because I have my friends on social media, I text my friends, I talk to my friends, I feel like, more online, but my family and not coming to work was really hard.
All right, and then when you did eventually go to into public, whether it was HEB or just even to get gas, or, well, even though we didn't need gas much, what was your experience in public?
I think I first started coming back into public when we started having to come back around work. It was before kids came back, but we started having, like, lead team came back and then teachers came back. And I remember thinking, having a hard time just matching reality with what had been going on. Like, oh, the building's still here. Oh, the grocery store is still here. People are still going out. This is still
All right. So, are you vaccinated, and why or why not?
I am vaccinated. I know it's a kind of a personal question, but for me, it was the right decision for my family and then working here around kids and stuff. So it just made sense.
All right. What is one positive thing that has happened to you throughout the course of the pandemic, and one maybe struggle you've had?
One positive, it kind of forced me to slow down a little bit in the beginning and look at work and what's important to me.
Hi, I'm Mrs. J. I teach pre-AP chemistry for the 10th grade.
All right, Miss J, so I'm going to ask you a couple of questions in relation to like mental health and the pandemic over the last year. So initially, when everything started shutting down and the world kind of stopped, what was your initial reaction to the COVID-19 pandemic?
Honestly, initially I was okay. I'm a really introverted person, so being isolated was actually kind of comfortable for me. But as that time kind of progressed, it started to feel more uncomfortable and uneasy, and there was that craving for interaction with people.
So would you say that you got kind of claustrophobic maybe when you were in quarantine, like having to stay at home all the time?
Maybe not claustrophobic, more like cabin fever-esque.
Okay. And then when you eventually started going out into public, whether it was to HEB or anywhere, what was your kind of reaction or experience?
There was a lot of, oh bleep, I forgot my mask in my car moments, and so that was really frustrating, and just getting used to that, and constantly trying to sanitize when you get at the grocery store, when you get in the grocery store, wiping down your cart, all that stuff is just an adjustment. I wouldn't necessarily say it was bad or as good, it just took some time to get used to.
All right, so when you eventually had to come back to work in person, how did you feel about coming back to work?
It was really confusing because it was kind of hard to figure out how we were going to teach kids in the building and virtual at the same time. I mean, I was excited because I get to be around students because it's a lot easier to teach in person than it is virtually. But at the same time, it's kind of nerve-wracking because you have to wear the mask and you don't know if any of your students have come into contact with anyone that's been in contact with COVID, and you have to take all these extra steps. You have to take your temperature when you get in, and it was exciting but stressful.
Next question, are you vaccinated? Why or why not?
I am not, mostly because I'm interested in having a child in the next 2 years. And I don't know if that vaccine, I don't have any long-term data studies or anything if that's going to interfere with the pregnancy, being able to get pregnant or getting pregnant later. And so I'm kind of waiting for more data to make that decision.
Nice. So what is one positive thing that has happened to you over the course of the last year, and one either struggle or more negative thing you've had to deal with?
One positive thing is I've definitely had more time to develop really well-structured lessons. I've had time to figure out the process of thinking and be able to come up with these lessons because we're only teaching 2 or 3 times a day versus 5 times a day. But the negative side, I've definitely seen a dip in my mental health, having to deal with, it feels like there's more duties to deal with when you're teaching online versus in person. And just this complete change and having to, and not being able to interact with people, it's really hard mentally trying to keep yourself together and look at the positive outcomes moving forward.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
I'm Mr. Cohen, the music director here at Idea Montopolis.
Awesome. So, Mr. Cohen, my first question, what was your initial reaction when the COVID-19 pandemic hit and everything started to close down?
My first reaction was mostly just one of I don't want to say shock, but maybe awe, just looking around at like everything melting down because of something so small. And actually the first thing that I remember doing was I pulled out my copy of H.G. Wells's which is it, The Martian? No, War of the Worlds. Because I kept thinking about how like this tiny little germ brought down the big aliens that invaded.
All right. So what was your experience throughout quarantine and having to be like locked in your house?
Well, the quarantines definitely kind of had different phases. So like right now I feel like we're in the Sunday scaries part of the quarantine where we're like, oh no, we might have to go back to real life. But at the beginning, it was pretty scary. It was pretty scary seeing what was happening to supply lines and to, you know, shelves in the grocery stores. And Megan and I a couple of times saw people get in fights over buying things. So it was scary at times.
All right. So when you eventually ventured out into public, whether that be HEB, even just to get gas, whatever, what was your experience?
Like I said, at first it was pretty scary and pretty contentious, but then it kind of evolved into this phase where everybody was masking and you know, they were limiting the number of people that could go into stores when stores were even open. And then I kind of moved into this phase where some people were continuing to mask and take things seriously, and some people weren't, and it was mostly sort of a political divide. It was always interesting. I would see families in stores, and it was like the dad wasn't wearing a mask, but the mom and the kids were wearing masks. But yeah, there's definitely been different phases to the experience of being out.
Agreed. Next question. When coming back to work, what was your like feelings, and how did you like kind of take having to come back to work in person?
I was pretty stressed having to come back to work in person, not because I didn't think that we could come back safely, but because I felt like there were still so many moving parts and unanswered questions that we were going to not do something safely unintentionally because we just didn't know enough, and because maybe our plan wasn't strong enough yet. But I have several of my very close friends are doctors, and two of them were working in COVID wards, and they were pretty adamant from the beginning, like, it is safe for kids as long as you take all the precautions, but your systems need to be really, really good. And at first I was just pretty reluctant because I just didn't know that, I didn't trust that the systems we needed were in place.
Awesome. Next question. Are you vaccinated, and why or why not?
I am vaccinated because I don't want to get COVID and I want to go out.
Nice. So throughout the whole pandemic, throughout the last year, what has been one positive thing that has happened to you, and one maybe not so positive or something you've struggled with?
Something I've struggled with is just seeing how it's impacted the program that I've built. I've put 80 and 100-hour weeks in pretty consistently into building the music program here for 3 years. And then it was sort of like disproportionately impacted because music doesn't work the same way virtually. It's a social activity, but it's also a physical activity that's hard to instruct with the physical limitations of distance learning. Some of the benefits is I think it's caused society to reconsider work-life balance, and I think I've gotten to explore some hobbies and spend a lot more time with my partner, and I think that's all been a nice silver lining.
Awesome.